Welcome to the Folk School on Willow Creek, featuring University Distinguished Professor Tom Ezern, singing and telling stories from the Salon on Willow Creek.
I need a bed for the night, boys, and my horses need hay. I've been riding that road line on the hot-ish highway. Thought one spring, just for fun, I'd see how cow-punching was done. So before the roundup was begun, I tackled the cattle king. Said, hey, my boss is down in town. He's at the palace and his name is Brown. I think to the ranch he'll take you down. Ah, that's what I want, says I. We started to the ranch next day. Brown ordered me most all the way. Told me cow punching was just child's play. It was no work at all. All you have to do is ride. It's only drifting with the tide. Oh, how that old son of a bitch lied. He surely had his gall. He settled me up on an old gray hack with 3 set fast up on his back. Petted him up with gunny sacks and used my bedding all. Put me in charge of the caballada and told me not to work too hard. All I had to do was ride and keep the horses near. I had 160 head. Sometimes I wished that I were dead. Brown's head would often get bright red. If any got away, straight to the bushes they would take, as if they were running for a steak. I often wished their necks they'd break, but they would never fall. Sometimes I couldn't hit them all, and other times my horse would fall, and I'd roll on like a cannonball till the earth got in my way. When I got on, he gave a bound, sprung in the air and turned around. Just then my head hit the ground. Oh, it was an awful fall. Well, he picked me up and he carried me in, bathed my head and commenced to grin. Says, that's the way they all begin. You're doing very well. Well, tomorrow morning, if you don't croak, I'll get you another horse that's broke. You'll not need a saddle or even a rope. No, I'll quit right here, says I. And we maybe should quit right there, but we're going on for a while with some Great Plains ballad tonight. Welcome to Willow Creek Folk School. Number 94. Can you believe that, Dr. K?
That's a lot.
Yeah. The Tenderfoot. You've heard that on the Willow Creek Folk School before, perhaps. Probably not anywhere else. It's the text I was singing came from Jack Thorpe's song-catching compilation, Songs of the Cowboy, which dates back to 1908. And he picked it up out of the air. It was written by a guy named O'Malley from Montana, although he started out in the South, Texas and New Mexico, come north with trail herds, and then ensconced himself with a ranch job in Montana, became something of a well-known character and cowboy poet in the early 20th century. Yeah, DJ O'Malley. He borrowed the whole melody and plot line, grafted it over from an Irish-American ballad. That's the closest we got to a St. Paddy's observance this week. He borrowed that over from the Irish comic song, The Day I Played Baseball. Again, a fellow who joined an outfit and things went badly. Now that song, Jack Thorpe, I'm pretty sure, picked it up in New Mexico. About the same time, it was circulating in North Dakota, we know, because George F. Will of Bismarck picked it up. And then he wrote a couple of articles. Now, see, what brought that to mind was I ran across this newspaper article in January of 1910, headed Cowboy Songs, Bismarck Tribune. George F. Will has received a bunch of reprints of an article on songs of Western cowboys, which was published in the American Folklore magazine. Well, now that was not some American Folklore magazine. That was the Journal of American Folklore, the founding academic journal, scholarly journal in the field of folklore. And Will actually wrote 2 articles for the Journal of American Folklore, recounting cowboy ballads that he collected basically from the hands who worked for his dad in the nursery. The article closes, George is acquiring an extended reputation along certain lines, which reflects credit on the city as well as on himself. I just find that line a little bit ambivalent. I don't know. At any rate, he was quite a Renaissance man there in Bismarck in the early 20th century. Anthropologists know him as the ethnologist too, as the author of Corn Among the Indians on the Upper Mississippi. Now, don't accuse me of getting into the weeds on that. We were getting into the cornrows, however, and we better get back to the ballads, huh? But somebody who also, at the same time, was collecting ballads, about the same time that George Will was a well-known American. This guy was a rock star poet in the early 20th century. I'm talking about Carl Sandburg, also the Lincoln biography, I'm going to call Dr. K over here. We ran across this write-up. You see, Sandburg, he was touring the country. He would write, he would read his poetry, and then he'd have little philosophical chats. And then at the end, he'd pick up his guitar, a nylon string guitar, and he'd start plunking away at cowboy ballads. This is an American poet who commonly would draw 4,000 or 5,000 into an auditorium to hear him read poetry in the early 20th century, Carl Sandburg. Well, in 1934, Sandburg, getting farther on in years by then, found himself in Wayne, Nebraska for a lecture gig. Sit down on the love seat here, Dr. K. Okay. And what happened when Sandburg came to Nebraska in 1934? Well, this is a little write-up that the local editor did. Can you give us some excerpts?
I will. Headline is, Versatile Carl Sandburg Talks Interestingly of Many Things. From Wayne, Nebraska, 1934. Carl Sandburg materialized for his Wayne reader friends Thursday. Those who had known him as a faraway, although unquestionably vivid and colorful figure of the literary world, met a Carl Sandburg of bronzed skin, tall, lank stature, and whitened hair. A deliberate man when off the platform, but well worth waiting for his utterances. He talks of politics from the vantage point of long association with prominent personalities. He discusses journalism with the familiarity of one who once labored in the country newspaper, but rose to editorial prominence on the Chicago Daily News. He's an authority on Abraham Lincoln, but not particularly talkative on the subject. He's both a student and an authority on American folk songs. Just now, he's writing a 4-volume work on Lincoln, the Prairie years. He has spent 5 years on this and looks ahead to at least 3 more for completion. He stopped into the Herald office to say that he appreciated finding a country paper which was close to its people, which knew how to be a country paper. Reading through the Herald's columns, he said he was conscious of how very complex are the farm problems of today. He commented on an editorial on painted lips and fingernails, enjoying it as a very frank expression with which he would agree 100% if he did not know some very worthy women who rouge themselves and paint their nails, but who work hard and have good brains. Just why these women adorn themselves thus is not very clear to Mr. Sandburg, but they have such excellent qualities that he is willing they should continue their frivolities. Speaking of the Western country, he stated that he never crossed the Missouri River to this region, but that he suddenly asked himself, what is it I am missing here? What is strange? And the answer is, no trees. He recalls a Brooklyn girl who was asked the difference between Eastern and Western regions and answered, "The East is where the trees come between you and God." American folk songs, at first a hobby and later developing into a much quoted book, The American Songbag, make a fascinating study. About 15 or 20 different kinds of folk songs may be found in this country. The American Negroes' haunting minor tunes, the American Cowboys' songs, old-time ballads, songs of the mountaineer folks, outlaw ballads, bandit biographies written in song, songs of the 5 years, songs of the big brutal city, and Frankie songs are included in his collection. The American Indian songs, so difficult to translate, songs of the Creoles of Louisiana and French Canadians are not included, nor the Hawaiian melodies. Since publishing this book, Mr. Sandburg has received many additional folk songs sent from all over the country.
Yeah, I bet he did.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of publishing books,
Yep.
anything to say about that?
I just met for over 2.5 hours yesterday with a debut author, a young fellow named John Enger. We are publishing his novel called Radium, about 2 teenage boys who get in trouble with the law and have a real Western adventure after that as they escape. So visited with him about 2.5 hours. I'm going to put a link in the chat when I get back to his website where he has narrated chapter 4, so you can get a sneak preview of it. He was a 10-year journalist for Minnesota Public Radio, award-winning journalist, and now he's writing and doing woodwork. So I'm going to send you to his website, but link on the one that talks about his writing, on the section about his writing, and you'll find that chapter 4. That's all I've got to say about the press today.
And so you want to hang around here, or do you want to get back at the controls?
I'll get back at the controls.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks. Oh, young Charlotte, yeah. Okay, it did get a little dark with this infernal daylight savings time. I thought there might be a view of the outside here tonight through the windows when we started up, but it's still getting dark by 8 o'clock, before 8 o'clock. So you can't see, if you're not from around here, that the winter is sort of breaking up here. And the geese are investing the country. And Angie's got her eyes on the skies quite a bit, watching for those honkers coming by. And I don't know, it's kind of improved our attitude around here. What do you think, Dr. Kay?
Yes.
It has mine, even though it's what we always call the muddy paw season around here right now. And we got some winter ballads yet to get in before we give up on that thing. And, you know, of course, a blizzard's going to come up and smack us in April, sure as the world yet. Now I'm sounding like I'm from North Dakota for sure, right? I've got Young Charlotte on the docket tonight. And this is another one that we've sung before, but the difference is, I got a new version tonight. Now, Young Charlotte, you may remember, is this antebellum 19th century poem. It dates from a newspaper account that came out in January 1940, and a poet wrote about this, a set of stanzas entitled "A Corpse Going to a Ball," and that kind of summarizes the plot line of the poem, become a ballad. And then people for a long time forgot that it actually had come from an authored poem. It was a terrifically popular ballad for singing on social occasions in the late 19th century, however. So I got to researching around on this here. And here, Wahpeton, North Dakota, January of 1889. Okay, this just kind of warms your heart. Listen to this. A surprise party at Uncle Peter Pilgrim's was the social event of the week in the neighborhood. At about 8 o'clock in the evening, some 35 or 40 of the friends and neighbors of Uncle Peter and Aunt Candace slyly drew near the house. And when the door was opened, in response to a thundering knock, poured into the house. The affair had been so carefully planned that it was a complete surprise to Uncle Peter and his good wife, who soon recovered themselves sufficiently to play the part of host and hostess to their usual hospitable style. After a couple hours spent by the young people in playing games such as Weevily Wheat, Old Quebec, and Sister Phoebe, those are play party day games of the day, and by the older ones chatting in cozy corners, Uncle Peter set a bushel basket of his famous bellflower apples in the center of the room. Now this is January, so he's obviously pulled them up out of the cellar when company arrived, with an invitation to all to help themselves. Aunt Candace put a pot of molasses on to boil for taffy, while the young people were set to work popping corn. This was all followed by a sing, in which all joined, after which Miss Betty Blennis favored the company with a solo, The Old Elm Tree, and Mrs. Nancy Parkey sang Young Charlotte. And there's more description of events. I don't know. Do you think these 19th century folks knew how to exercise community? Well, they surely did that night, huh? Well, at any rate, I not only find out that Young Charlotte was commonly sung at such occasions, and of course it's this deeply tragic ballad, but they'd sing it on happy occasions invariably. But then I find out that it's circulating through the Prairie states, which Louise Pound had reported earlier, and Franz Rickaby had found the song circulating in North Dakota, but I'm finding it's popping up in the papers. Interestingly, not in North Dakota or Montana. You'd think a blizzard song or a freezing to death song would be popular in North Dakota or Montana. Maybe it's too close to the truth. It's not. It shows up mainly in places like Nebraska and Kansas. Oh, I see here a text from Seneca, Kansas. And I picked one up in 1898 from Grand Island, Nebraska. And then, there's 1913 from Kansas City. And 1914 from Omaha. Yeah, and it's popping up in many places. You can see I got a thick sheaf of variants. So I've picked out a text that I like from Grand Island, Nebraska, published in the Grand Island Free Press in 1898. And we're going to do Young Charlotte one more time. And the rest of what I found out about Young Charlotte, you're going to have to wait until New Year's 2023. Because the ballad is set on New Year's Eve, remember? And about a tragic New Year's Eve. And so next New Year's Eve or thereabouts, we're going to bring this back out and we're going to install it in the Willow Creek songbag with annotation from the stuff that we recently found. Are you coming over here?
I didn't know if you want me to read this. The provenance?
No.
Oh, okay.
We're at Young Charlotte.
I'm just hanging out then.
You're just hanging out?
Yeah.
We're doing the Young Charlotte.
Okay.
Unless you plan to act it out.
I will, behind the scenes.
Young Charlotte lived on the mountainside in a wild and lonely spot. There were no dwellings for 3 miles wide except her father's cot. And yet on many a winter night young swains would gather there, for her father kept a social board and she was very fair. One New Year's Eve as the sun went down, far looked her wishful eye. Out from the frosty window panes and the merry sleighs went by. At the village 15 miles away was to be a ball that night, and though the air was piercing cold, her heart was warm and bright. How brightly beamed her laughing eye as a well-known voice she heard, and dashing up the cottage door her lover's sleigh appeared. Oh, daughter dear, mother cried, side, this blanket around you fold. For 'tis a dreadful night outside, you'll catch your death of cold. Oh nay, young Charlotte cried, and she laughed like a gypsy queen. To ride in blankets muffled up, I never would be seen. Ah, my silken cloak is quite enough, no, 'tis twined throughout, and there's my silken scarf to twine